Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. We're listening to an interview about agtech for building soils and how that is absolutely crucial if we want to do regen ag at scale. Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, investing as if the planet mattered. Podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we, as investors, big and small, and consumers, start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. Before we get started, I've been recording these interviews next to my day job, and I will definitely continue to do so, and release about an episode a month. But at the same time, I would love to take this further, share more interviews. There are many more stories to share on investing in regenerative food and agriculture. More depth, improve the quality, maybe even doing some video series. So I started a Patreon community, which makes it easy to support creators like myself. If these podcasts have been of value to you, and if you have the means, I invite you to support me and make this happen. For more information, please find the link to my Patreon account in the description below. And now, without further ado, the interview. Enjoy! So welcome to another interview, this time with Bert Glover, co-founder of Impact Ag Partners, which manages 160 million Australian dollars in land assets on behalf of international and domestic investors in Australia. This is our second interview. I've interviewed Bert before in April 2019, and definitely go back. I will share the interview in the show notes below to hear more about Impact Ag Partners, about the background and why he's into this space. But this time I wanted to dive deeper into technology. We see a lot of very interesting ag tech coming out, and we see a lot of that really focus on building soils. So I would love to spend a bit of time with Bert and dive deeper into why he thinks ag tech is so important in building soils. Welcome, Bert.
Thanks, Koen.
So can you share a bit about your interest in ag tech, basically, and the companies you've been involved in, and basically how you got into that space?
Yeah, thanks, Koen. I guess I'll take us back, if I may, Koen, to 2010, and I touched on in our last podcast, whereby Impact Ag Partners, together with one of our investor clients, we were building a vertically integrated grass-fed beef business utilizing our clients' assets. And this was all around demonstrating, I guess, how we were delivering ecosystem services and telling our story around production and regenerative agriculture and how livestock played such a critical role in this. And our investor client and us at Impact Ag Partners, together with our soil and plant specialist, Bart Davidson, we got to a point whereby we were sitting in the abattoir once we'd done a production run, and we had an amazing piece of meat. It was a strip loin from memory, and we were looking at this beef, and we were saying to ourselves and asking ourselves a question: if we're going to make a profitable, sustainable business out of a grass-fed branded beef, how are we going to deliver this high-quality beef on a consistent basis to our customers? Not only deliver it from a quantity point of view, but a quality. How are we going to keep that quality and that quantity to our customers? And so we threw that around for a while, and we got back to the fact that we were going to need some tools, and one of those tools was technology. We felt that in order to crack the nut, and, you know, grass-fed beef has a somewhat of a tainted reputation around inconsistent supply and inconsistent quality. So how are we going to build this consistency in our supply chain? And it came back to planning and technology. So if I go back to, 2010, we started, like many people in technology, with a crazy Excel spreadsheet with I don't know how many tabs on it, and trying to work out how we were going to manage our livestock, manage our grass, and where we're going to be moving livestock from and from which property to where, and where our suppliers were coming from and how long they were going to be on the farm, how many days on feed, what were our weight gains going to be. And we built this Excel spreadsheet, and it didn't take too long, and we realised we were pretty much out of our depth. Even though one of us was quite strong in using Excel, we pretty much realised that this was not going to cut it, and we needed to find a partner to help us build this software. So that's what we did. We found someone who had experience in the space, based in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, and we started to work through with them what this might mean moving forward. What are the tools that we need? What are the answers we needed to move forward? And it was interesting because when you start this process and you kind of start with a blank canvas, you start thinking about, well, you need, consistent genetics that, cattle have got strong fertility attributes and meat quality attributes and good temperament. And you look at, so that's the genetic side. You look at nutrition side, animal nutrition this is, and you think about, your pasture composition and biodiversity of that pasture, and you look at what inputs you might need, whether it's foliar sprays or soil inputs, and you look at your grazing management and the environment that the cattle are living in. What's the water quality like and access to water quality? And you start thinking about animal psychology and de-stressing the environment and all of the things that come into managing a grass-fed beef business and the supply chain. And it became pretty clear to us after going through this process that the major limiting factor to us was really about managing grass. For a grass-fed beef business that was vertically integrated, we had to understand how to best manage our grass, and that meant understanding how to match stocking rate to carrying capacity. So that's kind of the early days of how Maya technology came about.
And this assumes or indicates that there wasn't something out there that helped grass-fed beef producers manage their grass. Because if you had to first build a huge Excel spreadsheet and then turn it into a software company, which is not your core business or wasn't your core business, and obviously can be quite expensive and takes a lot of time, there wasn't something off the shelf you could just buy and use.
That's exactly right. There was nothing off the shelf. And actually, other practitioners that were using what we call large-scale rotational grazing in livestock systems, they were using a big piece of paper called a grazing chart. And a grazing chart has been used for many years and successfully. But I guess for us, a grazing chart is only, on the wall of the manager, who's ever managing the farm, and that information is kept in one location. It's not in the cloud. It can be daunting for new adopters, and it takes some time and education to train. And so for us, we wanted to digitize this. We wanted this to be something that you could walk around a farm with your phone or a laptop anywhere in the world, and you could see how many animals are on that farm, where they were, how many days feed you've got ahead of them. You could run some predictive analytics and all this different analysis. And so, we set about building this ourselves.
And how has been that journey?
Well, like any startup, it has its ups and downs. And you kind of want to fail fast and cheap if you can. But we, we are now in 2018 and 2019. And customers globally and the product has come a long way and, is really creating value for multiple users. And I guess that's really originally, we weren't even going to commercialize this product. We realized that this would just be an in-house product, but it became very clear that there was an appetite for this. And so we took it to market as a software as a service business. And it's moved on. It's helping people understand and match their stocking rate to carrying capacity, which we know is critical in terms of managing grass and helping them pasture budget. It's helping them, well, for us, helping us save time and being transparent with our information and being cloud-based, that information can be shared. And for us, when we started with our beef business, we had to understand where the cattle are and how they're performing and how they were going to fit into the supply chain and timing and all those sorts of things. So it was ticking so many boxes for us. And of course, as it evolved and became commercial, there was so many other things that had to be improved and advanced on, and it's come a long way, but it's getting real traction, which is fantastic.
Yeah, which is great. And how close, or maybe it's much further, actually it went much further, is it to your original question of getting more consistent when it comes to grass-fed beef? Is it delivering on that, basically on that question?
That's a good question. I guess there's other economic stresses and inputs that have impacted the grass-fed beef business. I mean, I think the core of it, to be a good grass-fed beef business that's vertically integrated, it still comes down to pasture management and grass management, and our capacity to do that now and capability is completely different to where it was in 2011. If I look back now at the businesses that are involved and how we manage grass and the impact that's had on our landscape and business profitability, just by making decisions early and being proactive, it's given us so many opportunities in the livestock market to come into the market with confidence, buy livestock when we probably wouldn't have in the past whilst markets are depressed, and conversely, having the foresight to say, well, let's run these analytics and what does it look like on this farm over the next 6 months, and what if we don't maybe sell our livestock due to drought now, what might that look like in the future? And I've seen multiple case studies where, we've saved producers $25,000, $30,000 just by making decisions, that month or 2 months earlier than they normally would without a product like ours. And, that has a major impact. And I think for us as well, we've got a broader vision here, and our vision is still around, building soil health and landscape restoration. And this product has really helped in that regard in terms of managing ground cover and helping biodiversity and pasture composition and build natural capital and all those sorts of things. So it's ticking so many of those goals, which is great.
And when you look at the piece of software, so one thing is it to take a grazing plan and digitalize it and basically keep track of information. Another thing is, and you mentioned it a few times now, is predicting what's going to happen in the future, which normally happen in the mind of the farmer and the manager, but of course not on a grazing plan. How is that happening? Like to go from, things that you could also do on paper, but it's nice to have in the cloud, so you can have access to it in London, etc., to actually something that is not that you cannot do on paper, but that technology can actually do for you. How has it been developing that side?
Yeah, so this is where I, for us at Impact Ag, and we use this across all our assets. This is one of the areas that we really enjoy internally in our business, because because it's cloud-based, this product, we can look at all our farms and have really good insights into what the future looks like and what the grazing plans are. And so primarily what the product enables you to do is to say, well, here I am today, and this is the amount of livestock I have. This is the rainfall I've had over the last X amount of months or years. And my position today, I'm quite comfortable with it. And I want to know, and I want to start thinking about, and I want to start putting a plan towards what the next 12 months might look like. And so if I can go into the product and say, well, this is the amount of what we call livestock load, or the amount of livestock I think I'm going to carry over, let's just call it the next 12 months. And I can run scenarios around what I think the rainfall predictions might be over those 12 months. And I can run those, punch them into the system, and run all these what-if scenarios. And then I'll put that in the system, and it'll give me a forecast, and I'll get an understanding in terms of whether I'm going to be understocked or overstocked over that period. And if I do take this action, where is there opportunity, or conversely, where might there be risk? and what's got to happen for this plan to execute successfully. And I'll look at that and go, well, okay, well, that's using those assumptions. And I can quickly just change those assumptions, and within 5 seconds, I can have a different set of assumptions and tell me a different story all in front of me on a screen, and I can share it or whatever, whereby in the past, if that was a paper-based tool, then, there's a lot of erasing and frustration and waste. And by using technology, it's completely changed the way we plan. It's completely changed the way we actually do farm budgeting. We start our farm budgeting process now by using this software that says pretty much over the next 12 months, these are the assumptions I'm making about the season, and these are the assumptions I'm using around livestock and the amount of my carrying capacity through those periods, and I can change them on a monthly basis and use different assumptions. And then from that, we can then spit out and say, well, okay, that's what we think we're going to do for the year. And then we put some financials to it. So it's really changed the way we manage financially on the farm. It's changed the way we manage our stocking rate. It's giving us analytics around, and this is another thing that we're really excited about, is now the amount of analytics that are coming out of this to make the decisions around capital expenditure in the future and where performance is coming from, both at the land level and at the livestock level.
And I'm imagining it also helped the communication and reporting to your investors and your clients.
Definitely. So if we've got investors in London or US or Geneva, as an example, at any given point in time, they can log in and see, how things are tracking on the farm, and they can, drill into what our grazing plans are. They can look at on our map on our homepage and see where the livestock are, and they can click on the livestock and see how many are there and where they're from and how much they cost, and what the margin could be there, and it's just given so much transparency. It's created a tool, and the numbers and the metrics are the facts, and the facts just take out any subjectivity in a discussion around farm performance and opportunities for the future and livestock numbers and carrying capacity, what we can and can't do. The facts just tell the story. And for us, it's been a bit of a game changer from a management point of view.
And are you using any, in terms of sensors, satellite imagery, drone imagery, are you using any of that as an input?
So we have started to use weather input, which is satellite input. We've also, on our platform, started to build out the software for third parties. So primarily IoT businesses that are interested in integrating IoT into farm management software. So
just for people who don't know, IoT is so what is the IoT?
It's the internet.
I'm blanking.
Internet of Things.
Internet of Things.
And so things like on-farm rain gauges, on-farm water storage facilities. So, you can have a sensor that tells you how much water is in a water tank, in a water reservoir. We're building out things for another third party around what we call virtual fencing. So virtual fencing is, you may be aware, where livestock have a tag or a collar that has GPS capability.
How is that market developing? Because I've seen, but that was quite a few years ago actually, something on goats, I think in Norway, and always intrigued by the idea, but I haven't seen it too much, but that maybe means I haven't been paying attention. What's been happening in the virtual fencing market?
Well, I think there's two key things. One is that the hardware, I guess, has always been the challenge in this space, and the hardware being either a collar around an animal's neck or an ear tag, and being able to, get enough solar energy into either of those two to drive battery so that you've got long life. And so that's at the hardware space, and that's getting more and more refined, and it should be very close to being commercialized. So that's that part. And then in terms of the software, well, we've built some software for one of those businesses, and it's very interesting, and it's going to be very dynamic. If you think about a farm, in theory, could probably have one fence around its boundary, its perimeter, and no other permanent fence on it. And the only fence is a virtual fence, which you, the farmer, move on your phone or tablet or computer. You can create an area where the livestock can and cannot go. So
let's explain it a bit, because I think not everybody knows virtual fencing. So it's basically either an earpiece or a collar when the animal, so the farmer, like you described, on his or her phone or iPad or tablet, like drew a line, like virtual fence.
Yep.
And as soon as the animal gets close to that, it either gets some sound or it gets some kind of signal that there's a fence or there is a barrier there, which is annoying to the animal. And the animal will basically try to stay a bit away from that, and thus staying into the virtual fence because there's no real fence.
That's correct. And that's how it works. And, you know, if you think about the capital requirement for standard structured fencing and materials and labour, and the limitation that puts on you from a grazing management point of view, I mean, it's really exciting when it comes to...
It's a potential game changer.
Oh.
How is it for the animal? Does she or he understand, like, because the electricity part of the fence, at least, is a visual thing. Are there going to be a lot of discussions around animal welfare on this, or what's your view on that?
There could be, and there could be animal welfare discussions on both sides. I mean, I guess there's an argument to say that, you know, by using a collar or an ear tag that has a noise, and then if the animal's not responding, if it gets a small electric pulse, is that worse than an animal running into a fence that has barbs on it, or an electric fence that gets a 10,000 volt shock? So I guess
that's a good point.
There's arguments on both sides. And again, it comes down to educating the animals and doing it in a manner that delivers strong welfare. And I guess, you know, if all of a sudden we're moving livestock virtually...
Which sounds really funny, because of course they're not moving virtually, they're also moving in real life. But yeah, I get your point.
Yeah, they're moving in real life.
It's not Farmville. We're not playing some kind of farm simulator. Yeah,
exactly. If the fencing is being moved, and, you know, maybe there's less stress through animal anticipation and the movement and handling of livestock, well, I guess there could be welfare benefits there and performance benefits as well. So still early days in terms of the amount of virtual fencing that's out there in terms of the hardware on livestock. Still plenty of trials happening, but I think the potential gains are so high that it's definitely worth pursuing further. And there is, you know, I think I know of about 3 startups that are really driving hard in the space. So watch this space in that regard.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I think it's one of those examples where you can see agtech really being a game changer for building soils. We see a lot of agtech. I mean, the news is constantly out there, how much money is being raised for agtech, how much money goes into vertical farming, how much money goes into conventional chemical input precision software for something, but not too much or not enough. I think we both agree on that, is going into agtech actually to help farmers and land owners and land managers build soil faster. But I think that space is going to explode just as much as virtual fencing, because there's so much we cannot even grasp that we can actually do with technology. Like, of course, digitalizing something like you did, but then actually taking it 5 steps further, and maybe in the future even 10, is I think very exciting. If you are in the tech space and you're interested in ag, really focus on that piece on how do you help people build soil faster.
Yeah, exactly. And there's new things coming out all the time and new initiatives. I mean, I've just seen one this week whereby these new soil probes that not only measure moisture, the probes go down 1 metre and they measure carbon at different levels within the soil. They measure nitrogen, phosphorus, you know, they're connected by a hub, and, you know, that could be amazing technology when it comes to unlocking, you know, the opportunities around soil carbon markets and the access for farmers to participate in the carbon market without having to do regular testing, just by having probes in the ground that are delivering information and also helping with day-to-day management around moisture in the profile, nutrient in the profile. It's really exciting, and hopefully, you know, we can see some of these bear fruit and come to light.
Yeah, because I think for a farmer or farm manager, you can observe a lot, and obviously you should. But especially if you're running bigger farms, like say larger than a few hectares, it becomes very difficult to have your ears and eyes on the ground everywhere all the time. And then you move to a country like Australia, where farms are gigantic. You need to take a small plane to fly from one end to the other. It becomes completely impossible to make decisions if you don't have those inputs and if you don't somewhere store it, because like our mind is just not big enough to see it and also to connect the dots in that. So it's such a crucial piece. What do you see? I mean, you're still building, but like the prediction software, the grass-fed management piece, what is another piece you're very excited about, or something like a big question you have, just like you had when you saw that amazing piece of meat and you said, how do we get there consistently? Is there another big thing that you see missing? Is that the soil carbon piece, or is that something else?
The soil carbon piece, that is something we're really interested in, and really looking closely globally at the leaders in some of the new technologies in that space. But I guess in terms of Maya, one of the things that we're interested in at the moment is the behavioural science of animals, and we're looking at ear tags in livestock that can, again, through GPS, give us some insights into the behaviour of animals. So it can help us understand things like if their heart rate changes, if their adrenaline levels rise, if they're distressed, we can track them. So things like we can tell if an animal is starting to show signs of distress, and by looking at its behaviour, we can see its movement and watch it on our computer screen. We can see where it's moving. Does it look like it's restless? Is it not comfortable in its environment? Therefore, are we meeting all of its needs in terms of environment and nutrition and water? And we can start to use that information again to track livestock behaviour in terms of grazing pattern, and start to overlay maps in terms of grazing yield and where all of the pasture is being harvested. And then we can get some understanding in terms of where the nutrient drawdown is within a pasture or a field. So some of the behavioural science stuff we find interesting. And if you go a step further, if you can see where your livestock are as individuals, and let's say every 15 minutes or 10 minutes, the satellite is beaming us information in terms of the location of each animal, you can start thinking about, well, this becomes a security tool. So if someone tries to steal my animals, or one of my animals just gets out through a fence and is, over on a neighbour's, you can start using these things for security and theft, and also things like an animal hasn't moved for a day. Does that mean, and is that animal a high value animal? Is that a bull or a ram? And is that, that might be a $20,000 animal, and has it injured itself, or is it, why is it not active? So behavioural science is something that's quite interesting, and for us, we're exploring this further. So yeah, watch this space.
It's extremely exciting. I think we can, just like when you stand in a landscape, you can barely imagine what is possible or what used to be. I mean, we always look at maybe records of 20 years or 50 years, but as we see now, some experiments coming up, like we don't know what a healthy pasture, maybe we don't know the mix of trees, we don't know how it used to be with large groups of animals. And we cannot even imagine that, but we can also not imagine what technology can do for us or with us in terms of management, and what kind of data, like a simple between bracket AirTag can get you. And maybe we found out that in the middle of the night, always at 3, all the cows gather for something, or they all go around a certain tree, or they self-medicate around something. There's so much to discover there. I think we're going to be very surprised.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, smart tags play a key role in understanding that. And I think that from a landscape point of view and a soil point of view, understanding at the farm level, production yields within a landscape. So what areas are performing superior to others, and is that got to do with the soil type? And what does that say about cation exchange and water holding capacity and what's limiting in our soils or what's not limiting, how would we either fix a problem or enhance a good attribute? Where might we deploy capital and invest in our farm based on where our livestock are harvesting? And what are the other observations? Is it got to do with pasture composition or all the things around diversity and ground cover? So it can play a landscape role as well to help us understand watersheds and ecosystems by animal behaviour. And, they're animals, as we know, they're intuitive and they've grown in nature, so they can tell us so much. So maybe with some of this data and analytics, we can start to learn so much more about our soil and plants and environments that we're trying to work with in farming systems.
Yeah, they can be great, and not to sound it, but they can be great sensors, obviously. If they don't like to be somewhere, and we don't force them, they won't go. And there's, especially as we're getting Regen Ag to a scale where, like you said, we're going to look at watershed levels, we're looking at landscape levels, we're looking at millions of acres or millions of hectares even, we have to figure out a lot more about the landscape than we know now. And we can do a lot through satellite, we can do a lot through sensors, but we can probably do a lot through observing ourselves and a lot of indigenous knowledge, but also observing animals and observing how they behave in the landscape and how we can actually regenerate a full landscape instead of just, again, within brackets, just a farm, which might be enormous, but it could also be very small. And at the end of the day, we need many more million hectares under regen management and under the best regen management to store as much carbon, water, and produce the food.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, one of the things we were conscious of in building this product, Maya Grazing, was what is all of the things that this data is telling us and how can we utilize it? And one of the things we were conscious of is building into our product the capability whereby the product could be used for carbon accounting in the future. So understanding things like where livestock have been throughout their life and where they've harvested grass and inputs and outputs and all the things required, to meet regulator requirements. We built that in early. And, all these things are contributing to building natural capital. So for us, it ticks so many boxes in terms of, managing our landscapes better, building natural capital, creating more profitable businesses, ensuring livestock have strong and positive outcomes, enabling our people to save time and energy, but be proactive and be able to make decisions with confidence. So it ticks so many boxes for us using technology like this. And I kind of feel like if the regenerative movement is going to advance further, we need to unpack and explore other opportunities for technology, because I think that's going to facilitate and support, capital flows into the sector. We need to be demonstrating we've got the tools to perform regenerative ag. And again, we need the markets, we need the people, and we need the capital. But if we've got the tools, and the tools are software products along with other tools, I think, we're going to be on a long way of improving our soils and our ecosystems as we work together with farming businesses.
And I want to be conscious of your time. So a final question, which I borrowed from John Kemp, and I adjusted a bit to this podcast. What do you believe is true about regen ag that others don't believe to be true?
I don't know what others don't believe to be true, but there's a couple of things I know and I'm passionate about. And one is that since we've been utilising regenerative agriculture, we're very confident it works. Point number one. Point number two, it's definitely the future. And we need to ensure that we adopt these practices more broadly and help some of our colleagues and friends and other farmers make the change and ensure them that, yes, change is difficult and change sometimes is scary, but it can be very rewarding. And I think our climate and our nature's telling us that things have got to change. And, regenerative agriculture is definitely something that we need to try and enhance into the future.
I want to thank you so much, Bert. We talked a lot about cows and technology in this podcast, but in the future, and this is a teaser, we're going to do more on row cropping. And I think there's a huge role for technology there as well. And actually the interaction between row cropping and livestock. I mean, there's so much more to uncover. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It was a great interview we did in April, and I'm very happy to do another one now today. So I'll be checking in with you, and thank you so much for sharing your technology journey this time.
Thanks, Koen. And I'd just like to say that we really appreciate the work that you put into this and your initiative and banding together like-minded people. So congratulations for your initiative as well.
Thank you so much. You just listened to an interview with Bert Glover, co-founder of Impact Ag Partners, about ag tech in building soils. I hope you learned something about the role of technologies can play in the regen ag and food space. If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you, and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much, and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording these podcasts since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? What questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space? For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in the space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, agtech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No. This is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning, I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're gonna look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soil builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.